History is going to look at what happened in May 2020 and subsequently between India and China on in northern Ladakh as the second most defining moment in the relations between the two countries. The first, of course, being the 1962 war. That was a time when the Chinese intruded, and there was marked lack of briefings, official briefings from the government of the day. This thing in New Delhi, the Chinese propaganda machinery was in an overdrive. There was great concern in the environment as far as the citizens are concerned as to what is transpiring. Strengthening the military aspects or strengthening the diplomatic aspects or just strengthening the international relations, that is not what is going to happen. It is an all-out war. We have to pull ourselves up. The society has to change. The individual has to change. And they have to force the government in power to change. There is a secret parlays which take place behind the screen diplomacies. The script is crafted, and there was a tremendous amount of pressure. The IMF and the other international funding agencies were involved. There was a threat of cutting off all the economic aid as far as Pakistan was concerned. The Pakistani generals realized that they cannot hold on to the coattails of China as far as confronting India is concerned. One is the Chinese model and the other is the Israeli model. They will look at either an opponent which they can intimidate through the sheer quantum of force which is employed against it, or they will organize a coalition, ensure that the target is softened enough, and then enter the battlefield. It is US which is playing the pivotal role. So willy-nilly, the leadership of the anti-China alliance falls on the US. But the actual war is being fought on the economic front. The aim is to squeeze the Chinese economy. So the PLA actually is also defending the nation and also defending the government from its own citizens also. What is happening to Jack Ma and a couple of other economic giants of China in the private sector is just a little bit what is being seen outside, that the internal struggle which is taking place in China. If they are able to control the private sector, then it is going to have an adverse impact. That with Xi Jinping having been anointing himself as the president for life, which is it has brought him into conflict with the ideologues
Correct.
of the Chinese Communist Party,
Correct.
who are now confronting him with the political space and the economic space which is being captured by the private sector and the consequential threat to the dominance of the Chinese Communist Party. If I were to sum it up in one sentence, I would say that the strategic vulnerabilities of a nation are the natural targets for an opponent.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for following Diplomacy Direct. Thanks for the response and the patronage everybody has shown for our initiative. We try and engage with the best individuals and forums who are striving to bring solutions to our modern day issues that's keeping our world progressing at the full throttle. Our current geopolitical issue at hand, on which we have discussed from different angles, is actually regarding the Indo-Pacific instability. And contributing to it today, we have Colonel RS Sidhu to give us a soldier's perspective via his new book, Elephant on the High Himalayas. This book is actually available on the Amazon link, which is given below. Now, Elephant on High Himalayas provide a very unique insight into the changing discourse between Indo-Pacific geopolitics, especially relations between India and China and all the parties that come into the picture. And here, Colonel Sidhu has served with the army for 29 years, and he's a decorated war veteran. And he actually brings the story with right credentials and with the first-hand experience backing his take on the subject. He is, I can say, he's the amateur China watcher for the past 3 decades, and again, from a perspective that his academics have been into politics, geopolitics, and history. He's an MA from Delhi University. So basically, his incisive and predictive analysis on the event and the strategic matters that he has published in the Center for Joint Warfare Studies journals and Tri-Service magazine from the Infantry School Mao or the Staff College Wellington. And his previous book, actually, The Success from Being Mad, which actually covered the real life stories from 10 mad veterans. He calls them karma yogis, those who are from the forces and then ventured into the entrepreneurial streak. So those who want to follow him can follow him on his blogspot, that is valleysandvalour at blogspot.com. So, star for the day, Colonel Rakesh Sidhu. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Vipul, and hope we have an interesting discussion wherein the audience also feels they have been able to put value on their time.
I have no doubt. So, coming right to it, sir. So, with the success of your previous book, like I mentioned. Which is also actually available on Amazon.com. That book was about the leadership choices of military veterans that has led to amazing social and entrepreneurial outcomes. And your round 2 of penmanship here takes us to the geopolitics in the Indo-Pacific. So why so, why now, and what different perspective can a reader expect from this book? That we all need to go and venture into it, and I need to know your first-hand analysis about it. So over to you, sir.
Oh, thank you, Vipul. You see, as far as jumping over from leadership forte and entrepreneurship by the veterans onto a geopolitical sphere, well, you see, the events were such. History is going to look at what happened in May 2020 and subsequently between India and China in northern Ladakh as the second most defining moment in the relations between the two countries. The first, of course, being the 1962 war. And the way the actions took place, it has activated geopolitical forces, the consequences of which are still unfolding in geopolitical and geostrategic time and space.
Correct.
So that is the importance of what happened last year. Over and above that, that was a time when the Chinese intruded, and there was marked lack of official briefings from the government of the day. This thing in New Delhi, the Chinese propaganda machinery was in an overdrive. There was great concern in the environment as far as the citizens are concerned as to what is transpiring. And again, because of the great propaganda which was taking place, vested interests were coming out with their own interpretations of what was happening on the borders in northern Ladakh. So that was a time when some of the interested citizens who were aware decided to enter the fray through the medium of social media. And being a China watcher of 30 years standing, I also decided to enter the fray. And over a period of roughly around 2 weeks, I launched a social media campaign all on my own, wherein I had to collect, collate, and then disseminate the facts and actual facts. Aim was to keep it short, keep it simple, so that the layman is able to understand as to what is happening. And that was a big success to a large extent within my social reach. I was able to assuage the concerns which the citizens were feeling as to what is happening on the borders. This also got me in touch with large number of young, dynamic professionals in India who are the ones who are active on social media, who've got the interest of the country at heart, and who are not willing to mince their words to say what they feel is right and what the country should be doing.
Absolutely.
So once the immediate aftermath was over, I was approached by large number of these young professionals with whom I had come into contact, and also my own group, that is the Silvers. We have been together for the last almost 40 years now, after our training in the Officers Training Academy in Chennai, at the time this Madras. So they wanted me to put this all down in writing. And that is how this book decided to take shape. And hence I have I have actually dedicated this book to these young professionals and to my postmates. We call ourselves as with the nom de guerre of Silver Warriors.
Silver Warriors.
Now,
wow.
As far as the perspective is concerned, what is the perspective that I'm bringing in which the others have not? Well, it is a very holistic perspective that I've got in. It is not got anything to do only with whatever has been happening on the military front or on the diplomatic front, but it's a complete gamut of the entire relationship which is being looked at afresh. So when we are saying that, what should I say, what is it fresh? You look at the title. The title says it all. It is Elephant on the High Himalayas. At what point of time did the elephant come down from the Himalayas, and at what point of time is the elephant back onto the Himalayas? And what is it? It is resurrecting Bharat to face off China, which also indicates that just strengthening the military aspects or strengthening the diplomatic aspects or just strengthening the international relations, that is not what is going to happen. It is an all-out war between India and China, which is taking place in the hidden spectrum. So for that, we have to pull ourselves up. The society has to change. The individual has to change. And they have to force the government in power to change. So this entire facet is very beautifully covered just in the title itself. Now, when we're looking at the perspectives, whatever it is, that it was here in the year 1952 when the Chinese, this thing came into Tibet, we voluntarily gave way. We had some armed posts which were deployed in Tibet. We were looking after their entire telegraph and post communication infrastructure. The entire logistics for the first winters for the Chinese troops which were garrisoned in Tibet, they went through India, Nepal. We voluntarily stepped down from the Himalayas. So this is one aspect. The second aspect is that when the first defining movement, which is the 1962 war, which came about, it created a shock and awe on the minds of our policymakers in South Block. As a result of which, for more than half a decade, we were following a very accommodative policy towards the northern borders, with China. all that change. And this change has not come about because the government of they wanted it. This change was forced by the social media activism of the young professionals and the citizens. Overnight, the government policy was changed, and thereafter the results are there for all to see. The military, which was all throughout kept out of the government organizations in the center, has now been brought into the front face, and the results are there for all to see. 65 war, 71 war, whatever the forces won on the field were battered away during the diplomatic resolutions of those conflicts. What did we get? 11 commanders level meetings have taken place. The military is leading the talks, and we are seeing the impact. We have not given away anything. Now, to look at it from the Chinese aspects also, one has to see ki, are the Chinese leadership really crazy? I said, no, they are not crazy. They are one of the most professional and nationalistic leadership which can be seen anywhere around. And it's a totalitarian society.
Yeah, they are well studied in the big power politics, definitely, and they have been learning from the bigger powers right since the Mao era, then to the Deng Xiaoping era, and so yes, so summing it up.
You see, there is just one point which I want to say as far as the China is concerned, that we have to see what is it that are the core interests of China. The core interest of China is the economy as on date. And to fuel that economy, they require energy. Energy has to come from outside the country. And that is where the crux of the matter lies. There are two key aspects. One is the safety and security of their maritime shipping lifeline, through which their entire energy resource has to be brought in. And second is the safety of their core. Now, it is very interesting to see here that the political core of China and the economic core of China is all along the eastern coastline. Correct. And to defend that core, they are carrying out their activities in the maritime regions of the South China Sea and the East China Sea. And from there is emerging the key issues of conflicts with the US and with the 11 other maritime neighbors which they have.
So we'll come to that point because I exactly have a question on Quad where you can cover all this.
Okay, fine.
Basically, coming back to the book, I find two aspects of the book very intriguing, right? So first is that for an analytical book on geopolitical and strategic affairs, it starts with a fictional narrative. So one is, can you cover the fiction in brief? Second is, you're substituting the name Bharat for India. So what does that actually signify?
I'm glad that you brought up these two subjects because they are the key to this book. This book has got a disruptive reasoning. As the traditional responses which are there against the Chinese, they are not going to pay dividends. The first aspect is, which we have to understand, that China acts and thinks differently. Chinese want to win the war without having to enter into a decisive battle. Towards that end, their basic issue is to carry out awe of the power which the Chinese can wield or which they can bring about to bear on the battlefield and on their opponents.
Correct. So the shock that you spoke about some time back. Correct.
Yes. So when we look at that aspect, we have to say that the Chinese too are vulnerable. Firstly, if they are saying that they have got X amount of power, please be assured that it is only X minus Y, which is the inflated power, which their infamous propaganda machinery is always churning out. So when we are able to understand the vulnerabilities of the Chinese and the allies of the Chinese when they talk of a two-front war threat against India, we have to accept that if we go and challenge those vulnerabilities, then there is no issue as far as combating them in a short and swift battle is concerned. If I were to sum it up in one sentence, I would say that the strategic vulnerabilities of a nation are the natural targets for an opponent. So when I was looking at this aspect, I said that I have to put in a scenario wherein we can afford to come out victorious in a short and sharp conflict, provided it is programmed accordingly. And this is a scenario which I have put into the book, in which the government of the day decides that we have to nip the two-front war threat of China and Pakistan in the bud itself, and then how they go about doing it. There is a secret parlays which take place behind the screen diplomacies. The script is crafted. Thereafter, the some interested nations, their air force is invited to carry out a large-scale aircraft air exercise along with the Indian Air Force. Simultaneously, there are two maritime exercises going on. One is amphibious with the US and the allied navies off the coast of Makran. And there is another one which is a maritime exercise between Japan, Australia, US, India, and the Philippines, etc., the navies which is carrying on in the South China Sea. So, as and when the situation develops, the inputs are given out through secondary and third and primary sources that India is planning a riposte. And when India is planning a riposte, obviously it is going to ring alarm bells. So the whole focus, it is so played out that the whole focus shifts to a naval riposte, that is an amphibious riposte by the flotilla of the allied nations and the India, which is off the coast of Makran, thereby diverting the attention of Pakistan and China towards that end. When the situation unfolds, there is a simultaneous situation which unfolds that the threat in being of the Makran coast remains as a threat in being. The amphibious exercise in the South China Sea goes into occupation of one of the unoccupied islands inside the 9-dash line, which the Chinese have established in the South China Sea by the Philippines and the Vietnamese, with the task force there to provide them cover. And this is the time when all the focus is placed here, that the Indian Air Force concentrates itself in the northern region and carries out a devastating strike in J&K, in POJK, I would call it, the Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. There were very determined reports that the Chinese have also stationed their air assets there, so on and so forth. There were certain uncovered technological advances which had not been put into the open, which were employed as a result of which the entire command and communication system in POJK and along northern Ladakh was compromised as far as the opponents were concerned. The wanted Chinese firewall was breached. Their famous BEIDO navigation satellite system was also went off the blink as far as the communications were concerned. And under this overall electronic and cyberspace deployment of top secret resources, the strikes are carried out throughout the night, and it is termed as Col Ratri. Now this Col Ratri is also very interesting, that how the name Col Ratri comes up. The Col Ratri, as far as the Bharat and the ancient text is concerned, Kal is time.
Correct.
And Ratri is the darkness. And Kal is also death.
Correct.
So the retribution is there, this thing all throughout POJK, all the air assets, both of the Chinese and the Pakistanis, they are neutralized because the Air Force was able to concentrate itself by the cover which was provided in the rest of India by the Allied Air Forces, which were presumably there for an air exercise. Now, this is a daunting force. There were 6 nations which were participating. There were 6 foreign squadrons, 6 assets of electronic warfare assets which were brought in, which are not discussed. There were other directed energy weapons which were employed. So it was a high-tech strike which was conducted there. It was so stage managed as far as diplomacy is concerned that the Chinese could not intervene. Chinese were also called into parleys by the Russians. The US were involved. The Israelis were involved. And there was a tremendous amount of pressure. The IMF and the other international funding agencies were involved. There was a threat of cutting off all the economic aid as far as Pakistan was concerned. The Pakistani generals realized that they cannot hold on to the coattails of China as far as confronting India is concerned.
So, very, very beautifully summed, and so the vastness of the whole, when you talk about one issue, it covers the entire geopolitical scenario in such a way. So, sir, I really appreciate you covering the whole thing, and this is what Diplomacy Direct brings to the followers and viewers, because most of our followers and viewers are those who are enthusiasts from the IR and so international relations and international affairs fraternity, and basically those students, those who are interested in joining the Union Public Service. So this is where the matter comes. So very fantastic. And in short, in one sentence, if I want to sum what you said about everybody getting together and countering the Chinese forces, is that if it bleeds, it can be killed, right? So
very true.
Okay, so with China, with slicing its way into other territories and being aggressive on its expansionism, what is your take on this current reckless Chinese foreign policy, the expansionist policy?
Okay, so you see, one way of saying it is that the Chinese are reckless, which a normal analyst or a person who's interested, a layman, would be saying. The other is that there is a method behind the madness. There are 2 spectrums of policies as far as geostrategic policies are concerned. I mean, I'll just digress so that I can bring across the point to the vaster audience also. One is the Chinese model and the other is the Israeli model. The Chinese model is focused on expanding their power exponentially, primarily with a view to to carry out an overwhelming import on the psyche of the opponents. And for that, to that extent, whatever are their capabilities and their resources, they are going to expand them enormously, because that is how they intend to impress the psyche of the public at large. The Israelis, on the other hand, will not talk about their resources and their capabilities. They will keep quiet about them. They will keep it undercover, so that the opponent is always guessing what is the strike capability of the Israelis. So at the moment of crisis, when those technologies are uncovered, they catch the opponent by surprise. It is a force multiplier which is utilized by them. Now, when we look at China and the US, again, there is very marked similarity also between the two. These 2 nations will never enter a battlefield, at least in the last 40 years, you will be able to see it, unless they are assured of victory. They will look at either an opponent, which they can intimidate through the sheer quantum of force which is employed against it, or they will organize a coalition, ensure that the target is softened enough, and then enter the battlefield. That is what the Chinese are also looking at. So when we say that China is going to get involved into a war with the US in the South China Sea, or the US will get involved in a war with China in the South China Sea, it is not going to happen. As far as the US is concerned, it is to be understood that logistics in any combat field play a major role. To organize a logistics for invading the Chinese mainland is not within the capabilities of the American armed forces as on date. Nor is it within the capability of the Chinese to carry out any offensive conduct beyond their immediate coastline in the maritime areas. Even though, as on date, the Chinese claim that they have got the largest navy in the world, the actual combat potential of that navy is not even adequate for them to carry out a sea denial exercise in the Indian Ocean or in the Pacific Ocean. Their strength, as on date, is just focused towards the East China Sea and the South China Sea regions.
Mm-hmm.
So when we say that the Chinese are crazy, that you have the Americans breathing down their neck in South China Sea, you have the Japanese who are rearming, you have the Australians who have come out from the death, almost literally like a death embrace of the Chinese, just as far as the government was concerned. They are also just antagonizing India by carrying out incursions along the southwestern borders. They have got an economic situation which is not going very well. They have got issues of human rights as in their outlying provinces.
Mm-hmm.
So why are they crazy enough to do so? No, it is not being crazy. It is just ensuring that they find that as on date, the weakest link between the eastern seaboard actions and the southwestern is India. India is a potential threat to their current policy of trying to access land lines of communication for their energy resources from West Asia.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the US and India and Japan combined together are sitting on their maritime lines of communication. So what they hoped was to carry out a sharp and short action to caution India and to ensure that there is no war.
Correct. So, sir, you actually covered
ensure that the Quad does not become military front. They wanted to move India out from there.
So how far you foresee the future India-China relations with the US intervening, the Quad formation and everything? So actually, like you explained that there've been a 10-round field force command level talks between these countries and everything. So where do you think it's heading?
You see, as far as the overall geostrategic situation in the Indo-Pacific region or Asia is concerned, we can break it up into three parts. That is the East Asia, the South Asia, and the West Asia. In East Asia, the confrontation is taking place between China and its maritime neighbors, that is Korea, Taiwan, Japan, and the ASEAN nations, incling
Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. Yeah.
And the US is coming in support of these the ASEAN nations and Japan and Formosa. In South Asia, it is a China-Pakistan combined, which is facing off against India. The US here is again fully backing at the Indian position. In West Asia, there is a conflict which is taking place between the Sunni-led Saudi Arabian alliance and the Iran-led Shia alliance.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese interest is to secure landlines of communication into the energy-rich areas of West Asia, which can only take place with the active support of Iran. It is coming in there.
Mm-hmm.
The US has got is providing full backing along with Israel to the Saudi Arabian-led Sunni alliance. So overall, which you see that whereas the China is a common factor in all the three distinct regions, here it is US which is playing the pivotal role. So willy-nilly, the leadership of the anti-China alliance falls on the US. Now, US has got its own stakes to ensure, that is their own national stakes.
Mm-hmm.
The US national stake is to cut off China from being a competitor to them on the geopolitical stage.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the soft belly of China for that? It is economy and their commerce.
So would you go ahead and call the Quad and the D10 an anti-China force?
Yes, while militarily the focus is to ensure that whatever creeping annexations China has done up till now, it is not able to go beyond that. So the Americans are carrying out the FONOPS, that is the freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea and off the western coast of Japan and in the East China Sea off the western coast of Taiwan. This is basically to deter the Chinese from any military adventurism beyond the line which they have already established in these regions. But the actual war is being fought on the economic front. The aim is to squeeze the Chinese economy. You have to look at it from this aspect that as far as China is concerned, a totalitarian state, the Communist Party is the same as China as far as the national interest of the government is concerned.
Correct.
For the Chinese Communist Party to remain in power, they have to ensure two aspects. One is that economically the citizens are able to live well. The second is that the army, that is the military, the PLA, remains under the control. So the PLA actually is also defending the nation and also defending the government from its own citizens also. Political control over the PLA holds primacy over professionalism. Hence, that is one of the key aspects when you discern the actions which were taken by the PLA at Galwan Valley and in Pangong Tso, that they had planned it over a period of a year. They employed the best possible troops which they had. They brought in the best possible leaders which they had. They chose the terrain and time of their own choosing. So, with the best military leadership, with the best military forces, place and time of their own choosing, the best of China were bested by India on the military battlefield.
So basically, with the formation of what you covered right now was with the formation of the trade blocs to create actual economic pressure, and then on the other hand, diplomacy that was trying to move mountains. This is the role that actual military leadership with its strategic placement try and stabilize or destabilize or escalate or unescalate, given to balance off the economic and the diplomatic pressure. So, sir, as a summation of our conversation today, right, with what angle do you think the book brings freshness from a current situational point of view?
Yes. So the aspect is that as far as the leadership is concerned, as far as India is concerned, I say it is a full-fledged war. The comprehensive national power of India is being challenged by the comprehensive national power which is at the disposal of China. The battle is already on. Apart, as far as the military field is concerned, there is a standoff, there is a negotiated withdrawal which has taken place in a limited period, in a limited geographical area. At the others, the forces are still in an eyeball to eyeball positions on the ground. But the actual battle which is going on is in the cyberspace, space, technology, internal security situation in these fields. And this is where we have to pull ourselves up. So when we have to pull ourselves up, we have to pull ourselves up first as the citizens. We have to pull ourselves up second as a society. And then we have to ensure that the country overall pulls it up and ensures that the comprehensive national power, which is available at the disposal of the country, is enormously increased. Here again, there is a dichotomy which I would like to say, highlight. In 2019, in February, when the budget was passed by the present government of the day in the parliament, there was a statement of the finance minister that by 2025, we want to project the economy of India as a $5 trillion economy by 2025. To increase the economy to 5 trillion in such a short time frame dictates that we as a nation have to make extensions into the markets of Central Asia and into the other world markets and East Asia. And these are all the areas where there is a conflict with China and with the other market forces which are there. These are all unstable regions. For us to be able to perform trade activities and commerce activities in these areas, our military power, our combat power has to be commensurate.
Correct.
The government also simultaneously announced the creation of the appointment of the CDS and for carrying out a strategic overhaul of the defense architecture of India. So the two actually implied a political willingness to first state that this is what we want as far as economy is concerned, and secondly to state that we are going to develop our combat potential and our comprehensive national power to ensure that our trade is safely carried out in these additional markets that we are going to explore. Unfortunately, on the ground, there is a mismatch between the intent stated by the government and the practical applications, which is that the budgeting of the defense is not commensurate for meeting this requirement. So this mismatch which is there between the intentions and the power space on the ground creates a dichotomy in the minds of the opponents. The Chinese are not one who are not going to take it lying down. If India is going to upgrade its defense architecture, if India is going to expand into the traditional areas which the Chinese feel are their markets, then it needs to nip the security challenge of India before India becomes too powerful to be counteracted against.
Okay.
So if this has to take place, we have to ensure that the comprehensive national power is developed commensurately with the expansions of our market. Because if we have to follow what is happening in the geostrategic and the geopolitical spheres tomorrow, then the best way to follow that is, and to predict it is, by following the trade and the commerce activities and the economic activities. Economy is a key criticality as far as China is concerned. China has got an issue. It is their private sector which has brought up the Chinese economy and the Chinese technology, where it thinks that it can stand up against the US as far as the global space is concerned. The criticality is that as on date, 60% of the Chinese economy share is of the private sector of China. And 80% of the workforce of China, that is the industrial workforce, is employed by the private sector. As the economy expands and as the private sector expands, it is likely to go beyond the control, manageable control of the Chinese political hierarchy. So there is an attempt to clip the private sector and nip it in the bud. What is happening to Jack Ma and a couple of other economic giants of China in the private sector is just a little bit what is being seen outside, that the internal struggle which is taking place in China. If they are able to control the private sector, then it is going to have an adverse impact. 5 years back, they attempted it. There was a slowdown in the economy of China, and perforce they had to let the private sector go. Again, bloom. Now, what is happening, that with Xi Jinping having been anointing himself as the president for life, which is it has brought him into conflict with the ideologues of the Chinese Communist Party, who are now confronting him with the political space and the economic space which is being captured by the private sector, and the consequential threat to the dominance of the Chinese Communist Party. So this key nuance has to be understood.
Okay, so as a summing up, so if I ask you 3 major points that the book will interest the youngsters, what are the 3 major points that or the takeaways that they will get from the narration in the book?
You see, the first is that China has got its own vulnerabilities and weaknesses. As far as the deployability of forces is concerned, we have got parity along our northern borders. As far as the maritime areas are concerned, because of the greater combat potential and the combat experience and the deployment experience of the Navy is concerned, plus our key location, we are capable of holding our own against the Palestine, against the People's Liberation Army Navy. This is as far as the military front is concerned. As far as the economic front is concerned, again, as on date, our economy is very, very weak. But the combination of efforts and the aid as far as technology and the allied infrastructure of shifting of industries from China to India and so on and so forth is concerned, the future is more favorable to India than to China.
Okay.
The third aspect is, that is the third takeaway, that when we as citizens are able to upgrade ourselves and are able to understand what the comprehensive national power is all about, and we ensure that the reforms are undertaken in a mature way rather than in piecemeal fashions, then I have got no doubts that by 2030, China will not be able to look at us even in a standalone mode, that they will be able to beat us comprehensively in any aspect, whether it is the cyberspace or it is space or it is the IT infrastructure and so on and so forth. So the future is rosy for us.
Okay. So basically putting everything together is that China's aggressive expansionism, its multilateral pressure over its own population, its own economic sector, its own political or geopolitical or foreign affairs is actually in 10 years you say that it's going to create an implosive effect. And
if I may intervene for a second,
yes,
I'll just use a colloquial phrase. The colloquial phrase is, कबर की खबर मुर्दा ही जानता है.
Very well said.
The Chinese hierarchy knows very well, propaganda apart, what are the inherent weaknesses within China.
Yes.
So its actions are actually reflective of its own fears.
Yeah.
खबर की खबर मुर्दा ही
Murda hi
जानता है.
janta hai. Correct. So actually, the CCP is going to be, instrumental in its own implosion. Okay, sir. Thank you so much for your time, the insights, and Elephant on the High Himalayas is the next thing to be seen. The next, book on its rise, and I would urge all the viewers and followers to have a look at this book on Amazon, and you got to have this copy. So thank you very much, sir. Thanks for gracing being on Diplomacy Direct, and I would surely come back to you to invite you for some other discussions with other stalwarts as like you. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Vipul, and thanks to the audience for patiently going through the interaction.